Hey, I don't know how to start this thing. This is me, Max. Hi, I'm Max. Happy to meet you. This is my first video on a channel where I'm going to be talking about books, or my first book-based video. So, I thought, what's a better way to start one of these channels than to talk about books that I like? And I think it's a great idea because I thought of it. So, we are going to be looking at my favourite books. These aren't in any particular order, and books, I read lots of books, so there's constantly books which can be added to my favourites. This is just the small sample of books that I think are amongst my favourite books of all time. The very first book I want to talk about is a recent book that is very popular. It is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Tessa Mosfeg. I believe that's how you say her name. Don't turn off straight away. Hear me out, okay? I thought I wasn't going to like this book. I thought it seemed too trendy to be my kind of cup of tea. I'm a hipster. But no, it's actually very, very my cup of tea. It's very bright lights, big city, Jay McInerney type writing. If you don't know, it's about a narrator, an unnamed narrator, I believe. You have to remember, my memory isn't the best, so I might not be able to recall every detail about these books, but it's about an unnamed narrator who, she's depressed, and she lives in Manhattan, and she, basically, it's just about her journey through the world of the arts, and stuff, and, like, the boyfriends she has, and the people she knows. It's really, really not, like, anything super hardcore or anything like that. It's very funny. There's a plot point about her trying to sleep a whole year through taking medication. But trust me, it's really not that much of a depressing book. It's very, I don't know, there's a very tongue-in-cheek element to it. If this book took itself any more seriously, it would be insufferable. But it's very, very self-aware of what it is. And I think it's kind of great for that. There's a passage in this book that I absolutely love, which was, you know, there's loads of, like, cultural references in here, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer gets referenced at one point, so obviously I love the book. But there's a really funny part where the narrator compares her current boyfriend with her past boyfriends, and how her past boyfriends were all, like, hipsters, and she designates them as being the type to masturbate over Salma Blair and Winona Ryder, whereas her current boyfriend is a very, you know, a normie, for lack of a better word, who masturbates to Britney Spears, and she likes that because she likes how he's not this pretentious hipster guy. I thought that was quite funny. But essentially, My Year of Rest and Relaxation, fantastic book. I got this for 50p at a library. So, if you see it for a cheap price, or a decent price, get it. Okay, next we have Inherent Vice by Thomas Pynchon. So, Pynchon is a reclusive, postmodernist, famous author who has been around since the 1960s? Yeah, the 1950s, 1960s. So, anyway, this is from 2009, I believe. It is a postmodern detective hippie novel. It's about Doc Sportello, this protagonist, who is a pot-smoking hippie private investigator, and he goes on this journey to find a missing person, which leads him into this most insane trip, for lack of a better word, that he's ever been on. And it's a very insane book. It's very funny. It's a great line between noir and comedy. It doesn't take itself ultra seriously. I struggle with some Pynchon writings. I'm not a fan of Crying or Vineland, but I think he has some very good novels. This is his best that I've read so far, but I'm yet to read any of his big ones besides V. So, there's also a great movie with Paul Thomas Anderson. Directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, sorry, with Joaquin Phoenix and loads of other people, which is one of my favourite films of all time. So, that's Inherent Vice by, I was going to say Paul Thomas Anderson, by Thomas Pynchon. Next up, if you're a film person, you'll definitely, I mean, in general, you'll definitely know this book because it's a very famous film. Trainspotting by Irving Welsh. This book is insane. I'll say that about all these books, but this one is insane. It's written entirely in Scots dialect, multiple types of Scots dialect, which is just awesome. Essentially, it's very stylized. There's no speech marks. It's just weird. If you think the movie is weird, this is way weirder. And I think, if anything, this actually, even though I think this is better than the film, it makes you appreciate the film more, because you just see how much that screenwriter, who I believe is John Hodges, how much he captured what this book is, but changed so much to make it into like an accessible movie. Because the movie's, it's accessible. It's a hit movie, but this book is hilarious, very dark, very weird, and I can't recommend it enough if you're the sort of person who enjoy that sort of thing. From one weird book to another, William S. Burroughs' Naked Lunch. This book kind of got me back into reading. Not fully, because there's another book I'll talk about later, but this book was one of the first books I'd read in a very long time. It's quite short. It's only about 100 pages. It finishes about halfway through and then goes into these all like editions and stuff like that. This is insane. William S. Burroughs wrote this while he was high on heroin the entire time, and you can tell because this book is just so dark, but so fascinating. It's so non-linear, yet so well written. Can't say much. This next book is Generation X by Douglas Coupland, a Canadian author, published in 1990 or 1991. This is a book which, although aesthetically quite dated, is very thematically relevant, and it's something I found very amusing. Essentially, it's about three people. There's only one narrator, but it's about three people telling stories about their lives. Essentially, that's essentially what it is. And it's all about consumerism, post-Reaganism, all that sort of stuff. It's pop culture stuff in there. It's lots of MTV and so on. And one of the reasons I love this book so much and that elevated it is how unique it is. Under most pages, you'll see there's like little diagrams and illustrations and stuff. But there's also like these little descriptions, like dictionary entries for like slang terms of the Generation X era. And I just thought it's just great. And it's very unique. It's a very creative novel. So, Generation X. Next book is Less Than Zero by Bret Easton Ellis. A very dark, controversial novel that was very controversial upon its release in 1985, and is still very controversial. A lot of people dislike this book. It is about a college student who returns home to California for the winter break to find that everyone he knows and loves is a complete degenerate, debaucherous drug addict. There's more to it than that, but that's essentially the basic gist. And it's very disturbing. This isn't like a fun, light-hearted, quirky coming-of-age read. This is dark. On the back, it compares it to Catcher in the Rye, but I don't think it's anything like Catcher in the Rye in terms of like tonally. Catcher in the Rye is like a nice warm winter blanket, even if the story is a bit, is a bit maybe depressing to some people. This is like being stranded out in the cold, but with some really cool neon lights and some good 80s tunes playing. Speak of the devil, Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger. This book got me back into reading, so I will forever be grateful for this book. There isn't really much I can say, because we all know Catcher in the Rye, we've all read it. I love this book. I love Holden Caulfield because he's like a terrible person, but he's so fascinating and compelling to read. Next one, Rules of Attraction by Bret Easton Ellis. I tried to limit this to like 2 books per author, so I didn't include any more Ellis. This is probably his least dark book, and it's my favourite. This cover is fantastic. I brought this secondhand because this is a great cover in my opinion. But basically, it's about 3 college students: Sean Bateman, who's the brother of Patrick Bateman in American Psycho, who appears in this novel, Paul Denton and Lauren Hind, I believe, like Chrissy Hind from The Pretenders. This book is it's them three and a sort of love triangle they get into. I'll say sort of, and I won't spoil how it's only sort of. But if you know, you know. It's kind of cynical, but also I feel that this book is his most warm and loving book to his characters. This is the only book where he doesn't feel like he's trying to shock you. Next one is Invisible Monsters by Chuck Palahniuk. Or Chuck Palahniuk, I don't know if you say it. Palahniuk writes very controversial, weird, out there novels a lot of the time. This is no different. It's a non-linear kind of story about a fashion model. Basically, she becomes this disfigured monster, so to speak, who after an accident. And it's basically piecing together why this happened and, you know, the sort of revenge that the main character has to enact on someone. This was Palahniuk's first written novel. He wrote this before Fight Club, and I prefer it to Fight Club. But I think that this is, out of all ones I've read so far, my favourite of Palahniuk's writing. Funny, a bit dark, quite dark, but not uber disturbing, keeps you awake at night type book. It's an interesting read. Next one, classic book, Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. This is my favourite Kurt Vonnegut, and it's my first Kurt Vonnegut. It's the first one I read. It's basically about a journalist who is exploring this weapon, this chemical weapon, essentially. I really don't want to give too much away, because this book is insane. It's very weird. It's so out there, and it's extremely short, and I read it in, like, a day. It's my favourite Vonnegut. It's the funniest, and I just love the style of writing. I just love everything about this book, really. And any postmodern literature that deals with, like, the atomic bomb and stuff like that, I will eat that up. This is this is a fantastic book. I know a lot of people prefer Slaughterhouse 5, but I don't prefer that book. I prefer this book. So, and also Breakfast of Champions is better, but it's still a great book. Not better than that, better than Slaughterhouse. Fight Club, Chuck Palahniuk. Won't spend too long on here because the movie is so famous, but this is a really good book. Great deconstruction of society, masculinity, and so on and so forth. And I love how you can really just dissect it and interpret it any way you want. It's quite different to the movie, but not massively different. Once again, very easy read. It's great. It's one of my favourite books. That's all I can say. Don DeLillo, White Noise. This is a postmodernist book from the mid-80s about Jack Gladney, a 50-something professor at a university called College on the Hill, where he does a course on Hitler studies, which is a subject of much ridicule from his peers. He lives with a wife and his kids, a bit of a dysfunctional home life. That is as much as I can say about the story without giving way too much away, because it's 3 parts, and it's so inventive. This is one of the most inventive, creative books. I think you have to sit with it. You know, it takes a while after you first read it to think, oh, this is fantastic. I read this because a university professor told me to read it, and I can see why, because this is, you know, we were talking about the books I like, and this is my sort of book. This is great postmodernist literature. It deals with, like, consumerism, the apocalypse, paranoia, you know, mortality. It's just really great. And they made a movie recently. Noah Baumbach did a movie with Adam Driver. Apparently that sucks. I haven't seen it. This book is apparently impossible to adapt. And, I mean, after reading it, you can see why. Which is why I don't think the movie will work, quite frankly. But that's just me. This book is great. And I think it's, if you like Kurt Vonnegut, you'll like Don DeLillo, I think. At least in this book. Very Kurt Vonnegut vibes. From that book. Second to last, Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Everybody knows this book. This is a classy book, obviously. I did not expect to love it as much as I did. I thought it'd be a cool read because I'm a big fan of the Kubrick film. I hate the 97 one. Everything about that book is just what wasn't meant to be. Everything about the movie adaptation, I mean, just isn't what the book was. So unfortunately, that is that. But this book, the original book, Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita, is the most disturbing book I think I've ever read. Genuinely, I'll have to do a full review on this at some point, because I don't think I've ever been more disturbed by a book. It really, really gets to you, and it's also beautifully written. It's just fantastic. I say it's a work of art, but like technically any piece of art is art. You know, any book is a work of art because it's art. But there we are, Lolita. Final book. This might be my favourite book ever written. Been Down So Long It Looks Like Up to Me by Richard Farina. I saved this till last because this book is insane. The writer had the most insane life ever. You probably don't know this book or this writer. I know it because Cliff Sargent, the from Better Than Food, talked about this book. Sorry, I've got a cold. Essentially, this book is a college campus novel about Knossos Papadopoulos, who is this cool proto-hipster who floats around, does drugs. It's brilliant. I'll read you the blurb. Richard Farina evokes the 60s as precisely, wittily, and poignantly as F. Scott Fitzgerald captured the jazz age. The hero, Knossos Papadopoulos, weaves his way through the psychedelic landscape, encountering, amongst other things, mescaline, women, art, gluttony, falsehood, science, prayer, and occasionally truth. A portrait of an explosive decade, sparkling with inventive writing and conveying the essence of a generation, but Down So Long It Looks Like Up to Me, as Thomas Pynchon writes in the introduction, comes on like the Hallelujah chorus done by 200 kazoo players with perfect pitch. I mean, if that doesn't sell you on the book, I don't know what does. This is great. The writer, Richard Farina, had a very interesting life. He died very young. He was very good friends with Thomas Pynchon, who I believe was at his wedding. Let's get time in. He was taught by Vladimir Nabokov at university, who was a big Nabokov fan. He married Joan Baez's sister, Mimi, who then became his wife, who he recorded folk music with under Richard and Mimi Farina, which some of that stuff is fantastic. The song Pack Up Your Sorrows, which Johnny Cash covered with his wife, is one of my favourite songs ever written. That's this. And I think what's great about this novel is, like, it has something for everyone. Unfortunately, it's out of print, and it's very difficult to find a copy. I had to pay 60 quid for this. 30 quid to buy it from a library in Seattle, 30 quid shipping. So I own a couple copies of it. I own 2 copies. I brought 2 more. One I sent to my good friend Carolyn, and the other one I own because I intend to give to someone else who wants to read this book, because it's not a book you can just recommend to everyone because it's hard to find. So this book, if you really want this book, I genuinely think the money is worth it. This is a fantastic novel. It has something for everyone, I think. If you like campus novels, read it. If you like the Beat Generation, On the Road, Ken Kesey sort of thing, maybe Thomas Wolfe, read it. If you like the 60s, late 50s, read it. If you like beautiful writing, read it. Because this has the most beautiful prose I've ever seen. They're hilarious, they're clever. I just don't know how a human being could physically have created this book. It's perfect, and I don't understand why more people don't know about it. The fact that this isn't considered a classic is a travesty. This deserves to be canonical. This deserves to be a canon work. And I need to make a follow-up video on this because there's only 2 videos on it on YouTube, like Chris Sargent's and some other guy's video. Very little information about the guy, which sucks because he is probably the coolest person ever. We just don't know enough about him. But been down so long, it looks like up to me. Read this book. So there you have it. Those are some of my favourite books, in no particular order besides the last one being probably my favourite. If you like that video, thank you. Like I say, obviously, I haven't really got anything going on here. I don't really have any room to record, so this is the best with my DVDs. But I mean, this is the best one. It's on my phone because I don't have a camera that works as of yet, or a tripod. But I promise the video quality is going to get better. This is not going to be forever. So, stick around if you want to. Give me boot recommendations if anyone sees this video, because I mean, like, come on, I don't think many people are going to see this video, but if you do, comment your thoughts, give me some recommendations or whatever. Sorry that this was a bit long. The videos won't be as long in the future. But there you go. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you stick around to the channel so we can become friends and talk more about books and such. So there you go. Thanks for watching, and stay beautiful.